we won't be here real long, because either in one of my more lucid moments or one of my less lucid moments, I took out some material from Herbert that I usually teach, so we only have 3 relatively short poems by him. Herbert was, this is on, the introduction's on 961, 962. The poems begin on, oh, I took out the altar. Wow. Okay, poems begin on 963. Herbert was a contemporary of Donne's, though about 20 years younger. Okay? Donne was close friends, just friends, not friends with benefits or anything like that, with Herbert's mother, whose name was Magdalene Herbert, like Mary Magdalene, pronounced Magdalene though, wrote a couple of poems for her and wrote a fairly long poem on her death. Okay? As I said, he and Donne were friends. They were both priests. Of the poets that we're doing this semester, I'm trying to look at the syllabus. Do I have? I took a couple others off. I didn't realize. Donne, Herbert, and Herrick were all Anglican priests. Okay? Donne and Herbert, Donne and Herrick wrote both profane and sacred poetry. Okay? Donne, before he took holy orders, wrote profane, not, F word here and there. Profane simply means not religious. Right? Donne and Herrick both wrote profane poetry. Donne before he took holy orders. After he takes holy orders, he only writes devotional verse and or funereal verse, which is all devotional in one context or another because he's talking about how the dead person's, gone on to the great beyond. That's Donne and Herrick. Herbert writes only devotional verse, which is, I think, the reason why I took about 3 or 4 poems off. Because usually after about the second one, students' eyes glaze over because they're like, really? Too much preaching. And that's kind of what devotional verse does. It wants to draw you closer to God. Sometimes it has the exact opposite effect, and, etc. So let's, we'll look at the 3 that we have on the syllabus, and then I might come back to 1 or 2. I need to make a quiz before my next class, so I wasn't thinking about that when I made up this syllabus, but it might work out well. Easter Wings, page 963. Notice you kind of have, I don't want to call this 2 versions. You get 2 presentations of it, okay? You've got a image, the facsimile image, from the first edition of Herbert's The Temple. The Temple is the title of the book of poetry. Okay? A manuscript of this was discovered in the 20th century in Herbert's own handwriting. So we can compare the first printed edition of The Temple with the one that Herbert actually wrote. And there are some variations, not a lot. With Donne, we don't have that kind of opportunity with most of his stuff. We've only got 1 poem in his own handwriting, and it was a letter to one of his patrons. So, Easter Wings, just looking at it, what is this kind of poem often called? Anybody know? A form poem or a picture poem, because it's the image that's important. Okay, Of course, it makes it really hard to read because you have to turn it around. And notice in the book here, whereas the first line in your printed volume is towards the gutter, in this way. In the book, it's also towards the gutter, but it starts here and reads this way. This starts here and reads this way. Okay? Lord, who created man in wealth and store, though foolishly he lost the same, decaying more and more, till he became most poor. With thee, O let me rise as larks harmonious lie, and sing this day thy victorise, then shall the fall further the flight in me. My tender age in sorrow did begin, and still with sickness and shame thou didst so punish sin that I became most thin. With thee let me combine, and feel this day thy victory. For if I imp my wing on thine, affliction shall advance the flight in me. Okay, it's pretty straightforward in terms of the meaning, but notice visually what it does. What is the first line of each stanza? And then the last line of each stanza. They're the largest of the lines. Okay? First line. Lord, who created man in wealth and store. Store there means full, complete, having everything. Well, that's the largest line. Though foolishly he lost the same. And what happens? Decay starts. You lose a little bit. Decaying more and more, and the line gets shorter, till he became, we're down to 4 syllables, most poor. And at the exact center, that is when the speaker is poorest. So, we shrink down and then do what? We expand. We grow again. Okay? With thee, which is connected to most poor. Okay? It's joined to most poor. With thee, O let me rise. 4 syllables, as the previous line before most poor was also 4 syllables. As larks harmonious lie. Morning birds. So, most poor, death. With thee, life, let me rise. It's resurrection. Let me rise as larks harmonious lie, and sing this day thy victorise. Well, what day is it? It's Easter. That's why they're Easter wings. Dying, rising. Then shall the fall further the flight in me. The fall shall further the flight in me. It's not a footnote. What's the phrase? Or is there a footnote for it? I don't think there is. Nope. Never a footnote when you need it. My brain is just fried. There's a phrase in English. I was trying to think of it in Latin, and I can't. The fortunate fall. It's Felix. It's not peccatus. I can't remember the other phrase for fall. Felix, fortunate, beautiful, etc., whatever the Latin word is. And it's this idea that, humanity really is better off because of what Adam and Eve did in the garden. And if Adam and Eve hadn't eaten of the apple, the proverbial apple, in the Garden of Eden, then what?
Then you wouldn't have, free will.
No.
Well,
Then Jesus never would have come. Okay, now try to wrap your mind around that a little bit. So if Adam and Eve hadn't screwed up, then some guy wouldn't, proverbially, don't kill me, some guy wouldn't, some bug up there, wouldn't have to hang on the cross. Well, that's kind of odd.
Also, we wouldn't have the knowledge of good and evil or any knowledge whatsoever. Well, at least knowledge in general, because they
My
didn't
son's
really
calling me.
make
Quit
it
calling
until
me.
they had, after they gained knowledge, I guess, of
Possibly. Most quote-unquote church fathers, however, don't like that idea. Well, that, but also the idea is, if humanity hadn't fallen, humanity would have become what they were intended to become without the crucifixion and resurrection. Okay? In other words, the way the Eastern Church Fathers interpret humanity being made in the image and likeness of God, they're not synonyms. Okay? The Protestant Church essentially says this is merely restating that. The preponderance, and not even only the Eastern Fathers, but the early Church Fathers, even Western Fathers, Justin the Martyr, and Leo, and etc., things like people like that, pre-500, 600. They say when God says, "Let us make man in our image and our likeness," that's one thing, and that's another thing. Okay. Image is the free will choice, that kind of thing. Likeness is what comes as a result of this. That is, likeness is what's supposed to come as a result of exercising properly free will and such. And the reason for the fruit in the garden, it's a simple test. Pick a child, pick a bunch of kids. Get 10 fifth graders together. Bring them into a classroom. Assume they're all, cookie lovers. Put a big old plate of cookies in there and say, don't eat. Simple test, right? Well, that's all it was. Simple test. According to the fathers of the church, if Adam and Eve had not eaten of the knowledge of the tree of good and evil, if they had obeyed, guess what? They would then later have eaten of that, and they would at the same time have eaten of the tree of life. Why are they kicked out of the garden? Is it solely because of eating of the tree of knowledge of good and evil? No, it's part of it. Kicked out of the garden so that they can't then go eat of the tree of life. Okay? So the whole purpose, so to speak, of the quote-unquote Christian life is to go back to the garden, is to undo the effects of the knowledge of good and evil, etc. So, then shall the fall further the flight in me, make me better off than I was before. Other wing, because you can't fly with only one. My tender age in sorrow did begin. What's that? This is the terminology of the Western Church, original sin. Those of you in my Shakespeare class, sorry, you're hearing the same stuff again. This comes from St. Augustine. St. Augustine said, sin is passed on through sex. It's genetic. Okay? Which is why, as we've talked about before, which is why in the medieval church it was taught, sex, even within marriage, was still evil. But you had to do it, otherwise the human race would die out. So get married, have sex, but don't enjoy it, because it's sinful. How do you come up with that idea? Because David says, Psalm 50, in sins did my mother conceive me. He's not saying sin is passed on through the mother. He's not saying women are evil. He's saying it's through intercourse. Okay? According to Augustine. I'm not saying David is saying that. That's what St. Augustine taught. Okay? Calls it original sin. Why? It's the first. It's the origin of sin that then gets passed on to everybody. So everybody becomes what? Guilty. Because according to Augustine, and those who follow Augustine's ideology, this is judicial and legal. Adam broke the law. And because Adam broke the law, all of his heirs suffer from breaking that law. Okay? The Eastern Church Fathers, however, call what happened in the garden the ancestral sin. It's the sin of the first ancestor. Okay? But it's not judicial and legal. It's not, you broke the law, therefore you die, and everybody comes from you. It's, what did they do? They introduce sin into the world. Well, this group think of sin not as a breaking the law. They think of sin as illness. It's an illness. It's a sickness. It's a disease. So what is needed? A cure for the disease. Well, interestingly enough, Christ is often called what in the New Testament? The great physician. He's come to, as he frequently says, heal people. Notice, he doesn't come, he emphatically says, to judge. Who's going to do the judging, according to Christ? Moses is going to do the judging. Why? Because there's the law later. And Moses is going to judge the followers of the law according to how well they follow the law. Jesus is there to, pass around antibiotics. The good antibiotics, so to speak. So, my tender age and sorrow did begin. He's talking about this. Tender. Well, how tender? Before birth. This is why the Catholic Church teaches, taught in the Middle Ages. I don't think it still holds this today. Taught in the Middle Ages, you need to baptize that child very soon. Because if the child dies without baptism, the child goes to hell. So there's a place in hell for unbaptized babies. Don't think Dante's, 9 levels and they're down there with Satan. In Dante's version, it's the topmost. It's actually just outside hell. If this room were hell, it would be like right here. Where they don't suffer, they just kind of for all eternity. Okay?
Wasn't that just definition of purgatory? Because they had that as a teaching for a while, that unbaptized babies would go to purgatory, essentially, or is that something?
Purgatories? No, I mean,
well, there was a.
No.
Used to be a thing.
Yeah, it might be now. That's why I said, not being Catholic, I don't know the Catholic catechism. In the Middle Ages, if you take Dante as your exemplar of Catholic belief, and he's a pretty good example, okay, the unbaptized are just out there in the kind of the limbo portion of hell. So, my tender age and sorrow did begin, and still with sicknesses and shame, get smaller, still. We've seen that word multiple times. It means constantly, consistently, always. With sicknesses and shame, thou didst so punish sin. Notice, sickness and shame are what? Punishment for sin. That I became most thin. I was big and fat, and because of sickness and shame, I wasted down. With thee let me combine, and feel this day thy victory. For if I imp my wing on thine, and you got a footnote there, that's stuffing feathers into a bird's wing. What does it do? It gives the bird more lift. So if I imp my wing, my broken arm, connected to your fully functional arm, essentially, what? Affliction shall advance the flight in me. And we're back at Dunn's Meditation 17. Affliction, Dunn says, is what? It's like gold bullion in the ground, gold bullion in the belly. What must you do to it? You must apply it. You must hear that bell tolling and say, ask not for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. It tolls for him who think it doth, etc. All right? That's the only. The altar is another picture poem, but it's a lot easier to read. Go to 971, the collar. In the pulpit. Okay? What's the title mean? Is it this kind of collar? He's a priest. Is it a priestly collar? We'll see. I struck the board and cried, no more I will abroad. Is that how those lines should be read? No. It should be, I struck the board. The board is the dinner table. And cried, no more. What does no more mean? Put that in. Every person in this room has said this before. Not in these terms. You've said, that's it. I'm done. I'm out of here. F you. He doesn't have F you here, but he might as well. What's the speaker getting? No more. What? Shall I ever, always, sigh and pine, long for something, complain about something? My lines and life are free. This is not like the speaker in Frost stopping by woods on a snowy evening. That person has miles to go before I rest. He's got people to see, things to do. This person is saying, I have no connections. I have no ball and chain. I have nothing holding me back. I'm free. Free as the road. Me and Jack Kerouac, man, we're going to, and Allen Ginsberg and all the other beats, we're going to go off and loose as the wind. Try and stop the wind. See what happens. As large as store. Think about that. As large as abundance. What? He means no boundaries. Nothing defines. Finitude. Out, nothing limits me. Shall I be still in suit? Your gloss. In attendance. Like suing for favor. Not in a court of law. Shall I still, what does in attendance mean? Attending upon. Waiting. Do I always have to wait? Have I no harvest, but a thorn to let me blood, gloss bleed, and not restore what I have lost with cordial fruit, like wine? Sure there was wine before my sighs did dry it, Petrarchan image. Excuse me. There was corn before my tears did drown it. Is the year only lost to me? That is, have I been waiting for whatever the speaker is waiting for? Have I only been waiting a year? What does he mean? Assuming it's a he. Could be a she. What does she mean? How many times have you experienced something like this? You've gone through a period of your life and you're like, has it really only been a year? Because it seems like a whole lot longer. My daughter last night had her appendix out. Third kid in 16 months to have an appendicitis. It's like, what the hell are we drinking? My third child actually, because she's the only one now who has an appendix, she's just going, as soon as I get a bellyache, just take me to the emergency room, because, okay? Seems like it's been a whole lot longer than just January of 2017 since my youngest, had his out. Is the year only lost to me? Have I no bays to crown it? No laurels, no rewards or awards. No flowers, no gardens gay, all blasted. That is, everything that I've spent the last year on, wasted? No, not so my heart. But there's fruit. And I would love to do it, just a short film of this. And have the guy kind of look off to the side and goes, there's fruit. What does that mean? This is a garden image. This is the Garden of Eden image. There's fruit. Guess what? Thou hast hands. You can pluck that fruit. Recover all thy sigh-blown age on double pleasures. Why double pleasures? Because the sigh-blown age was a period of time when the speaker didn't have any pleasure, didn't take any pleasure, didn't pluck any pleasure. The speaker said, no, I can't. I'm being good. I'm fasting. I'm dieting. I can't eat that. But the speaker now says, the hell with that. Look, there's fruit. Maybe literal fruit. Might be metaphorical fruit. Recover all thy sigh-blown age on double pleasures. Make up for the time you lost. Everybody in here has heard stories of, read stories of, seen movies about someone who finds out they've got cancer. 6 months to live. And how do the stories usually go? Well, I've got 6 months to live. I'm, say 30 years old. I probably would have lived to 85. So I've got 55 years to do what? Cram into 6 months. So what am I going to do? You write out your bucket list. Watch the movie, The Bucket List. Great film. Morgan Freeman and Jack Nicholson, thank you. Utterly fantastic. I thought it was going to be bad. Great film, okay? That's exactly what he's talking about here. Leave thy cold dispute of what is fit and not. What is that cold dispute? Why is it cold?
Because it's old.
No. What's meant by dispute? Argument. Leave the cold argument of what is fit and what is not. What is fit and what is not? What is that talking about? What idea does that talk about? It's morality. What you should do and what you shouldn't do. It is a cold argument. Why? Where does it occur? Does it occur here in the heart, in the chest, where there is ardor, love, which also implies heat? It's up here. It's rationalizing. It's logic. Logic is never hot. Logic is never passionate. Logic doesn't go, wow, she's gorgeous. I gotta marry her. No. Logic says, but you're already married. There's that problem first, Leave thy cold dispute, the conscience of what is fit and not. Forsake thy cage. What cage? Just Maya Angelou's Why the Cage Bird Sings. Forsake thy cage, thy rope of sands. Gloss. Delusive security. Asinine gloss. Do you really need a gloss for rope of sands? How good a rope does sand make?
A terrible rope.
That's the whole point. You don't. Who's the ass who edited this? Thy rope of sands, which petty thoughts. What's petty cash?
Extra.
Extra.
Spendable.
Spendable. Large amount, small amount.
Small amount.
It's small, it's little, it's minuscule, which thy petty thoughts did what? Have made. Your thoughts have made rope of sand and built a cage and made to thee good cable. That is, your petty thoughts of right and wrong have built cables around. What does he mean by cable? They didn't have cable like we think of cable. We don't have any hanging in here. Cable in Herbert's day meant ship rope. The ropes you use to tie a ship up in harbor, okay, or the ropes you use for an anchor. If you've ever been to a big sailing vessel, like the ones they use, for example, in Pirates of the Caribbean, okay, or Master and Commander, some of those cables are 1 meter wide. Yeah, that would be pretty good for wrapping you up in, right? Be kind of hard to gnaw through that. And made to thee good cable to do what? To enforce and draw. Draw means pull. Okay? And pull and be thy law. What is the enforcer? What is the dragger? What is the law? Petty thoughts of right and wrong. While thou didst wink and wouldst not see, afraid to look. Really? Wink. Shut one's eyes. Well, it might be that. It might be what else? Just winking. Winking at what? Look. There's fruit. Yeah, can't look at it. Why not? Because I want it. And I want it bad. But my thoughts tell me, no, can't do that. Can't have that, extra calorie. Can't have that. I'll use Augustine. This isn't me at all. This is Augustine. That other woman can't have that shiny, glossy, sparkly thing that I want. Away. Take heed. Take heed for what? Myself. I'm not going to pay any attention to those things anymore. Not the low-hanging fruit. He's not saying that. I'm not going to pay any attention to those ropes of sands. I will abroad. And I don't know. I never even thought of this. I've been teaching this damn poem for close to 30 years. Will can mean what in Shakespeare's day? Okay, it can mean genitals. It can mean will, volition. It can mean sexual desire. I don't know, and I'd have to check. I wonder if they had the slang term in Shakespeare's day, broad, that is still sometimes used today. A term for a woman. I will, I desire. Abroad. Yeah, I really have to check that. Because that would be, if that was a possible slang meaning for this day, that's the kind of thing you need a footnote on. Okay? Boy, I really hope it does. Because that would just add all kinds of complexity to this. Call in thy death's head there. What's the death's head? Skull. Okay, so there is a gloss there. Tie up so call in thy skull. It's not real helpful. It does tell you what a death's head is. We've talked about it before. What's it represent? Keep going. Yes, it is mortality. It's what about mortality? Okay, yeah, it is guaranteed. What else? This is the mortality part. A reminder of death. So, call in thy death's head there. Put that silly skull away. Why? What's the speaker saying? You're not going to die tomorrow. You're not going to die today. What's that really mean? So if you're not going to die today, and you're not going to die tomorrow, and you're probably not going to die the day after, and you might not die in the next week, what can you therefore do? Live. How? Pluck all that fruit, man. It's the recover all thy sigh-blown age on double pleasures. Call in thy death's head there. Tie up thy fears. Take that rope you've made, take those fears, stick them in a drawer, and go have some fun.
Is this about sex?
Could be. I mean, because the low-hanging fruit usually does imply sex. Okay? I mean, a lot of people read, the whole Garden of Eden story is being totally about sex. Why? Because Adam says what? When God comes walking in the cool of the garden one evening. Adam, no, where are you? And Adam's like, oh, we're hiding. Why are you hiding? Because we're naked. Who told you were naked? Well, the woman you gave to me, it's her fault. She made me eat, and she says, well, the serpent made me, They're all just passing the buck. And what can the serpent do? Yeah, but damn.
And not to mention that Goblin Market, like the phone Goblin Market, all the fruits and stuff is highly sexualized.
Yeah. Okay, so he that forbears to suit and serve his need deserves his load. So translate that. He that forgoes, doesn't, suit and serve his need. Suit, we've already heard that word. Shall I be still in suit? Attending upon, waiting upon. So he that doesn't wait upon, serve what? His need. Okay. Could be sex, very much. It could also be any other sensual desire. It could be food. It could be other kind of physical pleasure. So if you don't wait upon, that is, attend to your needs and fulfill your needs, your desires, then what? You deserve what you get, exactly. You deserve the load you have. Why?
You didn't help yourself.
Because you didn't help yourself.
Because you saw that there was fruit and you had ham.
Because you didn't do, what was this, Burger King? Have it your way? You didn't have it your way. You didn't, Frank Sinatra, I did it my way.
The last few lines.
Yeah, exactly. We'll get to those. But as I raved and grew more fierce and wild. Rave implies what? It's not a drunken dance.
It's
And
just like
grew
hollering.
Insanity. It's lack of reason. It's lack of thought. As I raved and grew more fierce, uncontrollable, and wild, at every word, methoughts. I heard one calling. Cue the James Earl Jones voice, child. And I replied, my lord. What's the voice?
God in the consciousness.
Heal. That's the caller. Is it the title? Is it also that? Yes, it is. Is it the priest's collar or is it like a choke chain? Because notice, it's at every word the speaker says, I hear, child, my Lord. So, I, child, don't you say it, my Lord. Strike! So what's the speaker getting at?
When he starts to give himself over to passion, then he remembers, like, oh crap, like, there's more going on here.
So is this a priest saying, oh, you know, I just like a week of not being a priest. An Anglican priest. And just be able to leave my little society. He had a little community of believers, kind of like a commune, and just ditch them for a bit and go off to the stews of London, you know, hang out with Will and the guys and just have a lot of Will, you know. You don't know. But this is a divine Paul. Because what's it about? Obedience. It's about obedience and not filling my suit. Not suiting my needs. Okay? The pulley. Make sure I put the lid on the bottle. When God at first made man, having a glass of blessings, called Dasani, standing by, let us, said he. Wait, what? Us, he? I mean, if he wrote that for me, I would circle us and he and put AGR. Why? One's plural, one's singular. Yeah. But who is this talking about? The Trinitarian God. Let us, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, said he, one God, pour on him all we can. Let the world's riches which dispersed lie, contract into a span. All the riches of the world spread around the globe, let's do what? Pour it all into one little body. A span. So, the first thing that comes out of God's bottle of blessings, strength. Why? Because without strength, he ain't going to live. Okay? Then beauty, then wisdom, honor, pleasure, and when almost all was out, God's poured, and there's just a little bit left at the bottom. God made a stay, perceiving that alone of all his treasure rest in the bottom lay. Now, little pun there. Rest meaning peace, quietude, satisfaction, contentment, but also what? The rest. He doesn't pour it, so there's a little bit left, but that is the Sabaoth, the big rest, okay? So God says, for if I should, said he, bestow this jewel, rest, contentment, satisfaction, cue the, Mick Jagger. Bestow this jewel on my creature, he would adore my gifts instead of me. If I pour everything out and he's completely content, then he thinks, everything he needs. And rest in nature, not the God of nature. So both should losers be. Humanity would be a loser. God would be a loser. Why? Why does God create humanity? Because he needs them? No, God's not alone. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Okay? How would man be a loser? Well, what you see around you would be everything there is. Okay? I've talked about before, St. Augustine said everybody has a God-sized hole in their heart, meaning only God can fill it. People try and fill it with all kinds of stuff. That low-hanging fruit over there looks pretty good, and that one over there, and money, drugs, sex, rock and roll, cars, whatever. Let him keep the rest. meaning all the stuff I already poured in him, he can keep all that. Strength, beauty, wisdom, honor, pleasure, and whatever is included when almost all. Let him keep all those. But keep them with repining restlessness. Fretful. Not a good word. What's really meant by repining? What's meant by fretful?
Fearful.
Fearful? What else? Okay. Complaining, lacking, wanting, desiring. One of U2's biggest songs. I still haven't found what I'm looking for. That is, I'm looking for something, but I don't know what it is. C.S. Lewis wrote about, correct me if I'm wrong, Andrew, I think it's got two. Sehnsucht, which gets translated usually as joy. Okay? He wrote a book, in fact, called Surprised by Joy, which is his autobiography. It's the shape of my early life. And what he describes joy there as is this experience that led him to search for, he did not know what. But this experience. He wanted to have this experience again. The experience was kind of a moment like in nature. So every now and then he'd be reading and he'd have this kind of, and so he'd go back and reread that work, but it didn't give him the same experience. So he sought out these, but he could never create the mechanism for that. He came to conclude, and he had this experience long before he became a Christian. Okay? Even when he was dabbling in kind of, as he puts it, dark occult kind of stuff. Okay? So, I was always looking for it. After he becomes a Christian and he writes his book, that experience was always kind of God tapping him on the shoulder and going, like playing with a little kid with a blanket. Peekaboo. Peekaboo. Okay? Emily Dickinson, which one is it? Emily Dickinson has a poem that's kind of like this, where she says, God's got to be careful, because if he reveals too much, what happens? The person dies. So what does he do? He kind of pulls the curtain back just ever so slightly and says, look at the bright, shiny light. Follow the bright, shiny light. Okay? It's the same kind of idea. Let him have all the rest, but let him not have what? Rest, contentment, peace. Let him be rich and weary. I like the first part. Second part, pulled a muscle yesterday. I don't like that as much. That at least, if goodness lead him not. Summum bonum, the highest good. If he's not drawn to goodness, yet weariness may toss him to my breast. Weariness. What's the speaker mean? I'm done being fed up, being worn out. I give, God. Uncle, you win. Lewis says in this spiritual autobiography, he was the most unrepentant convert in Christendom. He describes God as the hound of heaven, chasing him, running him down like a dog will a rabbit. What eventually happens to the rabbit? Has a heart attack. Okay? This is kind of the image he uses. God chased me down until I just kind of had to say, I give. That's the imagery that the speaker is using here. Okay, let's for a moment. Should we or not? Yeah, let's for a moment. Go back to. Yeah, I got time. The altar, the first page. Notice it's a picture in words. So you have a picture like of an altar, or kind of like a podium-like thing. This is where I sacrifice students' hearts here. A broken altar, Lord, thy servant rears, made of a heart and cemented with tears. You got your gloss there, Psalm 51. A broken and contrite heart, O God, thou wilt not despise, David says in that psalm. A broken altar, Lord, thy servant rears. What is it? It's the heart. Made of a heart, cemented with tears. That is, the heart is broken and the pieces are glued together with tears of repentance. Whose parts are as thy hand did frame. Why? Because God made the heart. God makes the person, so to speak. Whose parts are as thy hand did frame. No workman's tool hath touched the same. And this is Exodus reference. A heart alone is such a stone as nothing but thy power doth cut. What kind of stone is a heart? Or what kind of heart is stone? We use this phrase, some, today. So-and-so is hard-hearted. Usually means what?
They don't change
Tough?
easily.
They aren't
very compassionate.
They're not compassionate. Because compassion means you're all soft and warm and fuzzy. And you let people in. So, a heart alone is such a stone as nothing but thy power doth cut. David says, create in me, O God, a new heart. Okay? Wherefore, each part of my heart meets in this frame to praise thy name. This frame, the altar. Notice, I'm making the altar, the speaker is saying. To praise thy name, that if I chance to hold my peace, if I keep my words to myself, what? These stones, the stones of my broken heart, to praise thee may not cease. Well, what's he talking about? Luke 19:40. Everybody know, just off the top of your head, what that's referencing? It's Christ's triumphal entry. It's before Christ's triumphal entry into Jerusalem. People are crying out to him, and he says, believe me. If they weren't saying this, Hosanna, blessed he comes in the name of the Lord, the stones would cry this out. When you think about that, whether you believe that as religious belief or you just look at it as literature, that's pretty powerful. Because he's saying, if they didn't say it, the ground I'm walking on would go, Jesus, Jesus. Yeah. Oh, let thy blessed sacrifice be mine. That's the cross. And sanctify this altar. What's the altar? The heart. To be thine. Okay. How do you sanctify an altar? Through a sacrifice on it. So, use this heart both as the means of sacrifice, the stone upon which the sacrifice is made, and let it be the sacrifice. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Okay? We'll do one more. And then we'll stop. We got plenty of time. Love 3, page 973. It's called Love 3 because there are 2 other poems titled Love. Love bade me welcome, yet my soul drew back. Notice, my soul, not I. Why my soul? Is the speaker dead and the soul has been disembodied? Hold that. Yet my soul drew back, guilty of dust and sin. Dust. Material stuff. Okay? And sin. So love said, come on in. And my soul, when love reaches out, my soul does what? Shrinks away. Why? Because of dust and sin. But quick-eyed love, what does quick-eyed mean? Doesn't mean, love's looking all around. Quicken the dead. What's that phrase mean? The living and the dead. Living-eyed love. Okay? Observing me grow slack. Why is the speaker growing slack? Because the speaker did what? Drew back. So if the speaker is moving away from quick-eyed, living-eyed love, if the speaker is drawing away from life, the speaker's dying. The farther and farther the soul gets away. Quick-eyed love, observing me grow slack from my first entrance in, drew nearer to me. So, I'm backing away, and what's love doing? Coming towards me. What's the image we have there? Or what might that be? What might that be an image of? Just channel my inner redneck. What might that be an image of or allusion to? Okay, he's a preacher. Bible's on the mind. Louder? God chasing his children. How does he do that? The prodigal son. Parable of the prodigal son.
I guess he waits for you to come back to him. Usually the prodigal son.
Yes, with one clarification.
He's always pursuing.
In the parable of the prodigal son gets his inheritance, goes off to Vegas, lives a wild, riotous life, blows everything, ends up living in the pigsty, eating the corn husks that the pig eats, and then Jesus says, and one day he came to his senses. In other words, he stopped living based upon his will and started living based upon his reason and said, what the hell am I doing? Dad's rich. I should go back home. And so he makes his way back home, and this is the real kicker of the story. What does Jesus say? Where's the Father?
He runs up to meet him.
Exactly. He's not locked up in his house going, yeah, the hell with Junior. The eldest son's out working in the fields. But the father is what? He's standing, waiting, looking for the son to return. When he sees him, he runs to meet him. Notice, the son doesn't even have to get all the way to the father's house before the father meets him. He drew nearer to me, sweetly questioning if I lacked anything. Speaker says, a guest, I answered, worthy to be here. In other words, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy to be here, wherever the here is. Wedding feast of the Lamb, that's what it is. Okay? Love says, you shall be he. Notice, love doesn't say, you're worthy. You are that guest. You shall be. That implies futurity. I, the unkind, ungrateful, my dear, I cannot look on thee. Now, this is showing us what about the speaker? Is this humility? A couple of you are shaking your heads no. Could be doubt. Could be. I'm going to look at it again. I, the unkind, what is one of the meanings of the word kind? We've talked about. Kin, keep going. Natural. I, the unnatural, the ungrateful, cannot look on me. This is false humility. This is going, oh, Jesus, sorry. This is John Donne in a hymn to God the Father. Ha! You think you got me? Sorry, buddy, I got more sins than you can even imagine. Okay? So what does love say? Love, notice, took my hand and smiling did reply. Is this, mafia boss smiling, getting ready to, give him the kiss of death? Love took my hand, smiling did reply, who made the eyes but I? What does that mean? The speaker said, I can't look on you. Love says, who made the eyes but I? Put that in modern words.
I made you eyes, so of course you can.
Yeah, it's still a little benign.
I mean,
Who the hell do you think you are, saying you can't look at me? I made those eyes. Don't tell me what they can't do. That's what the speaker's saying. That's what love is saying. Well, true, Lord. Finally we get Lord implied. So it's not just, Cupid looking at me doing this. Truth, Lord, but I have marred them. Yeah, but I'm a good Calvinist and everything about me is depraved, so even my eyes, I can't, I've scratched my lenses so when I see you, Lord, I see you fragmented and dirty and let my shame go where it, no. Consign me to hell, because that's what I deserve. And know you not, says love, who bore the blame. Now that is a slap down. Don't tell me what you deserve. I know what you deserve. How do I know? Because I paid the price. I bore the blame, so don't even go there. I did. You don't have to now. My dear, then I will serve. Oh, then I will serve you. Kind of sounds like the chief of the apostles. Because what does Peter do at the Last Supper? They all eat, and then what does Jesus do, according to John's Gospel?
He washes their feet.
Takes his clothes off, grabs a towel, wraps it around himself, washes, and Peter's like, oh,
I should be
no.
washing your feet.
Yeah, exactly. You're not going to wash my feet. Well, then, Peter, you're not going to enter heaven. Okay, then wash all of me. He says, no, it's just your feet that are dirty. You must sit down. Love, says love, and taste my meat. Your gloss. Blessed are those servants whom the Lord Okay. I was going to say, what? When he cometh shall find, verily I say unto you, that he shall gird himself, make them to sit down to meat, and will come forth and serve them. You must sit down, says love, and taste my meat. So I did sit and eat. What's meant by sit down and taste my meat? This is my body broken for you. Eat. Notice, Jesus never says in the New Testament, simply know. Memorize all these doctrines. Know 1,000 Bible verses, and you're saved. Okay? All right, we'll stop there. So, one more day, and we have the two greatest, I think it was, Carpe Diem poems in the English language. One of them relatively tame, and one of them with one of the dirtiest lines in all of English poetry. I know, I just went and dropped it. Now you go, where is it? I haven't posted the sample exam yet. I was a little preoccupied yesterday.